texts and traditions have reminded us that we are connected. They've said that we are one, that we are part of our world, that we're part of one another, that we're part of the earth and the changes in the earth. In the last years of the 20th and now the first years of the early 21st century, science is now giving us that reason for our logical mind to make the connection, to see how we're related and how we influence the world, and how by honoring that connection through our hearts, we literally have the power to influence the very fields of this planet to sustain life in the world, sustain the health and the healing and the well-being of our bodies. And it's all about the magnetic fields of the earth. Where this really came into focus was around the events of September 11th, 2001. It was during that time that the United States has two satellites. They're called the GOES, G-O-E-S, Geosynchronous Environmental Satellites, I believe is what they're called. One positioned in the northern hemisphere, one positioned in the southern hemisphere. And the role of these satellites is to measure the magnetic fields of the earth and send back readings every 30 minutes. And those readings normally fall within a certain range of data that scientists are relatively used to seeing. Well, it was in September of 2001 that scientists began to see some readings that were off the map, just off the scale compared to what they'd seen in the past. And they said, well, what's happening? What is it that could be influencing the magnetic fields of the entire planet to such a degree that we're seeing these big spikes that our satellites are sending back? We've never seen these before. They overlaid the data from the satellites onto a calendar of months and days, and lo and behold, what they found is that the spike was occurring precisely during the time of September 11th, 2001, and even more precisely that the first spike occurred 15 minutes after the first plane hit the first tower in the World Trade Center. Now, the reason this is so important to a scientist is because for 300 years, our science has been based on two false assumptions. The first false assumption is that everything is separate from everything else, that what happens in one place has no effect on what happens anywhere else, and if it looks like it does, it's only a coincidence. The second false assumption is that our inner experiences of thought, feeling, emotion, and belief have no effect on the world beyond our bodies. Based on those two false assumptions that have been accepted for 300 years by scientists, I can see why there would be a disconnect when they're looking at magnetic fields of the Earth spiking precisely the moment the human emotion of the planet is focused on a disaster. This led to a series of studies, and the bottom line to the studies is this. What they found is that it is human emotion, specifically the magnetic fields produced by the human heart during certain kinds of emotion, that now are documented as extending far beyond our bodies into the physical world, and now to such a degree that our satellites hundreds of miles above the surface are able to pick these up. This has led to a number of studies now showing that when a certain number of people come together and they choose in a moment of time to create a precise emotion in their hearts, that emotion literally can intentionally influence the very fields that sustain the life on planet Earth. These fields are now implicated in everything from the immune response of humans throughout the planet, climate, weather patterns, cycles of war and peace, our ability to solve problems, our cognitive abilities. All of these, as different as they sound from one another, are all linked to our relationship to the magnetic fields of the Earth. So what makes this so beautiful is every human on the planet is linked to the field. But not every human on the planet has to be consciously aware of their relationship to benefit from what a relatively few number of people come to understand. And the bottom line is this, is that when we choose to feel feelings that create what is called coherence in our bodies. Coherence is the language, the quality of the language between our heart and our brain. Certain kinds of heart-based experiences, such as appreciation, gratitude, forgiveness, care, compassion, those are the ancient understandings that have always been taught in the truest traditions of our past, and now our own science is finding that those same traditions are now documenting this very real effect in our hearts. When we can feel those feelings in our bodies, they are mirrored in the field, and everyone benefits from the experience of relatively few. The human heart is now documented as the strongest generator of both electrical and magnetic fields in the body. Now, this is important because we've always been taught that the brain is where the action is. The brain has an electrical field, it does have a magnetic field, but they're relatively weak compared to the heart. The heart is about 100 times stronger electrically and up to 5,000 times stronger, 5,000 times stronger magnetically than the brain. And the reason this is important is because the physical world as we know it is made of those two fields of energy, electrical and magnetic fields of energy, electromagnetic fields. Our own physics books now tell us if we can change either the magnetic field of an atom or the electrical field of the atom, by doing that we literally change that atom. We change the stuff that our bodies in this world are made of. And it appears now that the human heart is designed to do both, to change both the electrical field and the magnetic field of our bodies and our world, and they do so in response to the emotions that we create between our heart and our brain. Well, I've had many questions from people asking me how these discoveries relate to what is now known as the law of attraction. What we find is this: it's less about attraction and more about a mirroring. And here's what I mean by that. The world around us, our own science now is telling us there's a field of energy that underlies all physical reality. In 1944, the father of quantum theory, Max Planck, identified this field and he called it the matrix. That's where this term came from. And what we're now beginning to understand is that when we create the feelings of what we choose to experience in our lives, everything from conscious choices of the perfect relationship or abundance in our lives, or the healing in our bodies, or the healing in the bodies of our loved ones, that those feelings are creating the patterns of magnetic and electrical field in our hearts that are literally rearranging the stuff of this quantum soup, this quantum essence, allowing the pattern of what we have claimed in our hearts to become manifest in the world around us. So it's less about attracting from a scientific perspective and more about consciously creating the template within us, knowing that the stuff of the universe will congeal around that template in the world around us to simply mirror, reflect what we've claimed.
The discovery was 40,000. Every human, everyone listening today, I'm going to speak to you directly again, you have in your heart approximately 40,000 specialized cells that are like brain cells, but they're not in your brain. They're in your heart. They're called sensory neurites. So they are brain-like cells in the heart. They are concentrated in such a degree that they actually call this the little brain in the heart. So what does this mean? This isn't a metaphor. And I was just in Europe, and many of the people there, they said, well, you know, this is a metaphor, right? You're using this as an analogy. And I'm saying, no, this is literal. These neurites in the heart, the little brain in the heart, they can learn independently from the neurons in our brain. They can think independently from the neurons in our brain. They can remember independently from the neurons in our brain, and they communicate with us separately from the neurons in our brain in a language that we may or may not recognize, because we are conditioned to see the world through our brain, and if we're lucky, at some point in our adult lives, we get to connect with our hearts. So we have now access to these sensory neurites. We can work with the brain independently of our heart, and I think most of us know how to do that very well. We can work with the heart independently of the brain. Scientists say it's all about the brain, forget about the heart. And I've been around a lot of my friends who say it's all about the heart, forget about the brain. They actually chastise the brain, you know, the left brain is this bad thing. But here's what the science is showing us. Both of those ways of viewing ourselves are incomplete. When we marry the heart and the brain together, when we harmonize the heart and the brain, This is the extended neural network that makes us different from all other forms of life. This is where our deepest empathy, compassion, intuition comes from. And so people say, well, why would you want to do something? You know, what would be the purpose of harmonizing your heart and your brain? But it means more if you know that there's something very, very special about this. So when we are able to harmonize the little brain in the heart with the big brain in the head, we can do that. Heart-brain harmony. So many benefits, and they're different from one another. But for example, we can process information very, very quickly. Really fast information recall. And it makes sense. Here's the reason why. Because when we access information with our heart, with our intuition, we don't go through the logic and the fear and all the self-esteem and all the doubt that we have in our brain with our ego and our mental functions. Our heart doesn't work that way. Affirmations are very, very powerful tools to implement change in our lives anytime. But they are especially potent. Here's the key. They are especially potent if we are communicating with our subconscious in a language the subconscious recognizes through channels that the subconscious recognizes. So when we harmonize our heart and our brain, what we're doing is we're opening, it's a hotline to the subconscious. That's where we would introduce our affirmations of our perfect relationships or our healing. This is where the healing begins in our bodies. Extraordinary states of intuition, deep intuition, are available through this harmonizing of the heart and the brain. And there are 3 key steps to harmonizing the heart and the brain. And the first one, it sounds obvious, and there may be a little bit more to it than what we've been led to believe. It is, I'm inviting you to shift your awareness from your thinking mind into your heart. We are so conditioned to being in our mind that sometimes when we're asked to do that, we say we're in our heart, but we're still in our mind thinking about it. So what I'm going to invite you to do is something I've learned from my indigenous friends all over the world, shamans, yogis, monks, nuns, abbots in the monasteries, and they all do the same thing. I'm going to invite you to gently touch your heart center in a way that's comfortable for you. It can be with a single finger right over your sternum. It can be with an open palm, as they do in the Mayan traditions and in some of the Middle Eastern traditions. The Buddhists will create a prayer mudra and actually nestle their prayer mudra right there in the little hollow in their chest, that gentle pressure, in whatever way is comfortable for you. And here's the thing. Here's why this is important. Because your awareness will always go to the place on your body where you feel the touch, where you feel the sensation. So in whatever way is comfortable for you to touch your heart center now, that will draw your awareness, and that will promise that you have shifted from your mind into your heart. Step number 1. And I'm going to do the same right here. And just allow your awareness to move to the place where you feel that touch. And step number 2 is I'm going to invite you now, I'm going to invite you to slow your breathing just a little bit, to maybe 5 seconds on the inhale or 5 seconds on the out breath, the exhale, or whatever is comfortable for you. And here's why this is important. This sends a very, very powerful signal to your body. The first signal, shifting from your mind to your heart, that says I'm turning my attention inward. That's powerful. The second signal right now is when you slow your breathing. The only time you would breathe this way is when you are in a place where you feel safe. So you're telling your body, right now, I am in a place that's safe. And that frees your body to let go of the stress hormones and the feelings of stress. And when that happens, it awakens the healing chemistry, because your body can only do one or the other. So now that we're letting go of those stress hormones. We're now giving our body permission to awaken the healing chemistry in our bodies. Powerful immune response, anti-aging hormones, all of those. So we're breathing a little slower from the place where we feel the touch, telling our body we're safe. All right, the third step. This is very, very key. This is very powerful, very potent. Is about feeling. I'm going to invite you now to create a feeling in your heart where you feel the touch, where you're breathing. To the best of your ability, if you can feel one or some combination of the following 4 feelings. Care for anything or anyone. Appreciation for anything or anyone. Gratitude or compassion. Care, appreciation, gratitude, compassion. And what the researchers have found is that these 4 key words will trigger the experience between our heart and our brain to create that coherence, 0.1 hertz. To the best of your ability, feel those feelings as you breathe from your heart center in the place where you feel the touch. I'm going to give you just a moment to do that. I'm doing the same right here. All right, and if you'll take one more deep breath, please. And as you release that breath, what I want you to know is this act, this very ancient, very primal act, it is the key to the deepest truth of who you are as an individual, who you are in this world. This is where the super learning comes from, or when you're working to solve or create something new, a new painting, a new piece of music, to write a book, to create poetry, something new, it comes from this deep space. This is the process that gives you resilience to a changing world and allows you to embrace change in a really healthy way. And once again, if you're not into any of those things, it is a trigger for over 1,300 biochemical reactions, from the anti-aging hormones that we didn't even really address in here today, but I do in the new books, to our immune response, cardiovascular health, all of these from this very simple, ancient, primal, and simple, easy act. So I invite you now to take one more deep breath. I'm doing the same, and release gently. So you're shifting your awareness from the act of harmonizing your heart and your brain, but I want you to know that the cascade of biochemical connections that you have initiated, it doesn't end when you open your eyes. It doesn't end when you take that deep breath. They will continue, and what the laboratory studies have shown, again, is that they will last at least 6 hours. The immune response in your mouth, the SIGA immune response, most powerful, first line of defense in our immune system, is kicked into overdrive from doing this right now. It lasts over 6 hours, and all you did was to have a feeling and to breathe in the most natural way. And I've had people say to me, Greg, it can't be that simple. And I say, I believe it is precisely this simple, because we live in a world that is simple until we make it complex. Nature is simple. Science is simple. Until we use big words and a lot of equations to describe that world. But it all comes down to you and me, Earth and God. And that relationship has to be a simple relationship.